Hello, this is the thrilling conclusion of the story of World War One. So we broke it up into 4 parts, so hopefully instead of doing like one tremendously long video, it was too confusing to understand all the wars, all the people, all things going on. So hopefully by breaking up into 4 pieces, you'll understand what's going on. So this one, in the last part, we just talked about the United States just entered the war. So long story short, now all the people that were going to be in the World War are now involved. It started very small. We used to have Germany and Russia and Austria and France, and now we have all these different countries all involved now. So now we're just going to talk about what happens at the end of the war. So first of all, I have a series of slides just to talk about the numbers of the differences between the Allied powers and the Central powers. So you can see here on the slide, by country, there's different colors that represent different countries, but the Allied powers represent just a little bit less than 40 million, and the Central powers a little bit less than 25 million. So a big significant gap, like 15 million people more for the Allied powers. In terms of artillery shells, we have over 200 million like artillery shells, like bullets, and the Central powers have not even 50 million. So a huge difference there as well. So because of these differences, we have a series of Allied assaults in 1917. So essentially, those that are on the Allied powers, they have plotted, they're planning to attack because they have all these numbers. We have the United States now, so let's start our attack. So remember, we have the Allies with 4 million troops, Germany only 2.5 million. The Allied powers, they had better artillery, they had better intelligence, not intelligence like they're smarts, but they had more capabilities of understanding what the enemy is doing, and they had tanks. Remember, tanks were just starting to get introduced. So because of all this, because of all the stuff that they've acquired and they understand, they're like, okay, the German lines on the Western Front could be broken and now we could attack. Germany, they kind of sensed what was going on, so they withdrew troops back to what they call the Hindenburg Line. And I don't have a map for you, but I'll show you guys in class. But basically, there's a part on the Western Front, remember the Battle of the Frontiers, that separates essentially like France, Belgium, and Germany, and then there's this one line called the Hindenburg Line that Germany was kind of like home base for them. So the first attacks were from the French. What happened was that there was this battle at Chemin des Dames, and it was a big loss. So again, France goes on the attack and they lose to Germany. So bad that in 5 days they lost 130,000 people. It was horrible, and it got so bad that even people in the French army, refused to fight. There were these mutinies. Here's an example of an execution of a French soldier. So here's a French army, here's a French soldier that refused to fight. So to get people to convince them to fight, they did court-martials and they did executions to stop anybody from even considering not fighting. Very serious stuff. Because of how bad this ended up for France, they had to do more of a defensive strategy. So instead of attacking now, because we was like, we're going to go fight, and they lost all these people. So it's like, okay, forget it. We're just going to be on defense now. So that's France. Britain, they decide to attack in Belgium. So this one, France decides to attack Germany. Here, Britain decides to attack Belgium. This one lasted 3 months. This is called the Third Battle of Ypres. And this one also was bad for the Allies. The battle lost 240,000 people for Britain. So huge, 250,000 people lost in this attack. Again, because the casualties were so big, they stopped any further attack. So they're like, okay, let's go attack Belgium. And then when they go there, they lose so many people. They're like, okay, just like France, we're just going to go on the defensive now. We're not going to do any more attacks anymore. So France loses to Germany. Britain loses to Belgium. Here's some of the troops at the third battle. Italy decides to attack Austria. Okay, so if you refresh your memory, France decides to attack Germany. It went terrible. Britain decides to attack Belgium. It went terrible. This one, Italy, this was at the Isonzo River, and it wasn't as bad as the last two that I just talked about. But basically, the Italian forces, they engaged in several attacks against Austria. In this case, there was no real territorial gains. So no one really won. It kind of like it was a standstill. Like they just, whoever's side they were on, they just stayed there. But again, a lot of people were lost. So the Austrian-German counterattack. So again, Italy started this attack. They actually advanced 80 kilometers, so you can think like 80 miles. So like they advanced a little bit further into enemy territory, and they captured 275,000 Italian troops, prisoners of war. So just like Britain, just like France, Italy, because they lost so many people and also so many people were captured, they also couldn't launch attacks for about a year. So right now it doesn't look so good for the Allies. How about Russia? So Russia, they want to go in the offensive in Galicia. We talked about before, Galicia is this area with a lot of great resources. And a much larger Russian army attacked German forces in Galicia. The Russians were kind of successful enough that they moved 30 kilometers into German territory. So, they're approaching, they go on the offensive, they get more land from Germany. But the problem was that there was a lot of issues in the Russian army. So as big and bad as Russia is, the problem is that there's internal struggles in Russia. So people in the Russian army didn't want to fight. So there was mass desertions. So here's a picture of a Russian soldier, and some soldiers want to leave, and another soldier has to force them to go back into the trenches. People were trying to ditch and to leave the army. They just didn't want to do this anymore. The army, just because of this forcing, because they're so mean, the army, again, this internal struggle, even people in the Russian army start to lose faith in their leaders. So even the army itself, this big bad Russian army, even them don't like their leaders as well. So a small gain for Russia, a small gain for the Allies, but you can see the cracks in Russia. They're starting to fall apart. So it gets even worse with the Russian Revolution. What happens is that the Bolsheviks become in control. In November 7, 1917, Lenin, Trotsky, and the Bolsheviks, they take over the Russian government and issue 2 decrees. So we got this new government going on. We got this Russian Revolution. The people uprise, and we get these new people in control in the government. Lenin, Trotsky, and this group called the Bolsheviks. They did 2 cool things for the people. Okay, one was called the Decree on Land. So when we have this new government taking over, this revolution, if you don't remember the revolution, was basically a battle between the rich and the poor were sick of what was going on, and the peasants uprise. Now we got this new government, and one of their first duties is we gotta take care of the peasants, we gotta take care of the poor, because we don't want them to uprise against us. So they did 2 what they call decrees, kind of like laws. The first decree was called a Decree on Land, and what that allowed was the nationalization of property. So instead of privatizing property, instead of property being owned by certain private parties, now they opened up free land for everybody. So the property was nationalized. It wasn't limited to just private parties anymore. And the most important one was this decree on peace. So they declared that Russia, we don't want to fight the war anymore. The economy was bad. The people were angry. The armies, again, not trusting their leaders. So we made this decree. We're not going to fight in the war anymore. So this decree made a lot of Russian soldiers leave the war. So hey, there's no more war. Hey, there's land now. So everybody kind of leaves the west side of Russia, the east side of Germany, and they leave in droves, by the hundreds of thousands. So because they all left, Germany just invaded. There's barely anybody there. So they took modern day Estonia, Ukraine, and Belarus. So because of all of this, Germany and Russia come to an agreement. Okay, it's not the end of the war, just Germany and Russia agree not to fight. So this is called, and try to remember this, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Okay, big things. First of all, Russia, because they're withdrawing, they say we don't want to be in the war anymore. Russia says they're gonna give the Baltics, the Caucasus, and Poland are now Germany's. Okay, so in exchange for leaving the war, you could have all this land. Ukraine and Finland are now allowed to be nations. So Germany controlled Ukraine and Finland; they become nations. And there was massive losses to Russia's population, industry, and agriculture. You knew that. So what was the economic punishment? So first of all, because of the past damages and unpaid loans, they agreed to make large payments to Germany for all the money that they lost. And if they decide to engage in trade, Germany got the right to export their goods, to basically sell their sell their stuff to Russia and Ukraine without any taxes, or here it says duty free. So Germany got a pretty good deal out of this. They got more land, they got payments, and they don't have to get taxed anymore if they're trying to sell stuff in the different countries. So what was great about this for Germany, they got all these resources, they got extra stuff that they needed because, again, they're outnumbered in this war. So Germany gained much needed resources. And this will come up in World War II, but obviously this treaty was so one-sided for Germany that all of a sudden Russia, even though they signed this treaty amongst the public, had a lot of bad blood towards Germany. So we got this little tension between Russia and Germany, even though they signed the treaty. Think of it as rivals. They're kind of bitter, kind of angry. They agreed to it, but there's this Russian-German conflict brewing at the end of this treaty. So Germany, we talked about France not doing well, Britain not doing well, Italy, not to say that they didn't do well, but they didn't gain much, and now Russia is out of the war. So Germany is like, all right, here we go. So Germany, because Russia is gone, they shift everybody to the west side. So with the war ending in Russia, all the troops, let's go to the west. Problem was is that, again, the U.S. joined the World War, so now their army, their troops, they're coming too. So it's kind of like Germany gets more people coming from the east. Well, the Allies get more people coming from the United States. One of the main operations or offensives that you need to know is called Operation Michael. So once Russia left the war, Germany is thinking about, okay, what can we do? How can we attack the Allies? So one of their chief ideas was called Operation Michael. It was actually named after, I think, Saint Michael, one of the patron saints for Germany. And their idea for Operation Michael was they were going to break through the Western Front and advance 40 miles into Allied territory. I think ideally what they really wanted to do was attack Britain and attack them quick. So remember the Schlieffen Plan, we wanted to attack France quick because Russia would take forever to get there. Germany wanted to attack Britain quick. A couple of reasons why. One, to separate Britain and France. So like if they could attack and get the land in between France and Britain, it would be a good space for them to occupy, because then France and England are not connected. And the other thing is that, remember, America is bringing people over across the seas. So the faster we can get this done, America can't come and help out. And it got so good, there's a general for Germany, Ludendorff, and he leads these Germans like 56, so close, so far into Allied territory that they were within 56 miles of Paris. So, sounds good, right? We've got we've got so many Allied losses. We talked about them all losing. Russia's leaving the war. Germany, because of Operation Michael, is advancing. And it looked like it's going to, the Allies, it doesn't look good for the Allies. Until the Second Battle of the Marne. So this is considered the turning point of World War I. So if you forget all the battles, which you shouldn't, the main battle that you should remember is the Second Battle of the Marne, because this was considered the turning point of the war. So again, at this point in the war, Germany and the Central Powers are just dominating, even though they have so few people compared to the Allies. So the German army decided to attack at the Marne. But the Allies, one, they've gotten used, after a couple of years fighting against Germany, they kind of understand what Germany's strategy is. Also, the Allies now have more tanks, they have more planes. So, a couple of years into this war, we've built a little bit more tanks, we've built a little more planes. And also, they weren't surprised by Germany's attack. They already knew, because of their great intelligence, they knew that Germany was going to attack. They knew their plans already. So, when Germany attacked at the Second Battle of the Marne, Germany was defeated, and they went from 5 million to 4 million troops, roughly, in the Second Battle of the Marne. And that was considered the big turning point in the war, because up until that point, the Central Powers were dominating. The problem is that time was running out. So, as we talked about before we even started this whole PowerPoint, like the first part, is that the Allies have way more resources, way more people, and way more stuff than Germany. So the longer this war wore out, then Germany would die, because they just don't have enough people, don't have enough stuff. So all these wins, technically, were losses. First of all, the American troops were arriving by the hundreds of thousands. German victories, even though they won in certain places, they lost troops. So even though, say for example, they have 100 people and they win, but they lose 50 people, then you sacrifice all these people to win something, and your army is like depleted. The problem with winning more territory is that it also had more to defend. So I'm going to take all of the Western Front, I'm taking more of the Eastern Front, parts of Russia, but now you have more places that we need to defend. So now your army is thinning out, and it wasn't big to begin with. Because it got bigger, the supply lines, they grew longer, and they're also unreliable. So getting supplies, food, medical stuff, it took forever to get there. And because there was food shortages, again, we're way spread out, and all the economy is towards the army. There's not that much food going on. There's not that many people making food. So the troops were susceptible. This was like a big deal in the war, was the flu, because the flu really ravaged the army for Germany. So in 1918, we saw a picture of this at the beginning. The gap is kind of closing. Now we have like 11 million for the Allied powers, and we have 9 million for the Central powers, which is a big difference from the first slides I showed you. So this one's a means to an end. It's supposed to be a joke, a pun, if you will. The Amiens offensive and Saint Mihiel. So here's a story. So the Allied side starts another attack called the Amiens offensive, and this offensive was whole bunch of tanks, whole bunch of artillery, Amiens offensive. So strong and so good that the German army was pushed back again towards the Hindenburg line. So remember at the beginning they were at the Hindenburg line. Then they started to win, so they're closer, farther to the west, and then they're back to the Hindenburg line because of this Amiens offensive. 500,000 American troops, 500,000 American troops attacked at Saint Mihiel, and there was just too many people, and they forced the Germans back. September 26, 1918, 123 divisions, kind of like teams of Allied troops, attacked successfully. And now, because of this gigantic offensive and this great attack at St. Mihiel, Germany was forced to begin thinking about how are we going to end this war, because first of all, they lost at the Second Battle of Marne, and they lost so many people. They were just dominated because of this offensive and St. Mihiel. So here's one of the other Central powers, Bulgaria. Now they're about to, it's the end of the road for them, and this one starts at Salonika. So the Allies, they attack from Greece. So 700,000 Allied troops, they attack enemy forces in the Balkans. Okay, so they're attacking from Greece, attacking at the Balkans, at Bulgaria, and the Allied attack is successful. So after all these losses, that place is called Dobropol. Bulgaria troops, they start to mutiny also. Again, mutiny meaning they're starting to quit. They don't want to fight. The troops are not happy. They just don't want to fight anymore. Because of this, and because of what was going on with the war, the capital, Bulgaria, they start to revolt also. The public is just like, we're sick of this war because of the economy, because we're losing all of our people to the war, we're not winning. So in September 29, 1918, Bulgaria called for an armistice, and now they left the war. So a piece of the Central Powers now leaves. Another piece of the Central Powers was the Ottoman Empire, and they were having problems of their own also. Emir Abdullah ibn Hussein, he was the leader of the Arabs, and within the Ottoman Empire, the Arabs uprise against their rulers, the Ottoman Empire, and this created instability across the empire. So within their own empire, people are fighting against them, like a civil war inside their own empire. This is so bad and made them so thin that in September 1918, the Ottoman forces were driven back by the Britain forces, and this area was called Megiddo. And because the Arabs were uprising against them, because Britain was driving them back, now they started negotiations for peace, and they now exited the war. So Bulgaria leaves, Ottoman Empire leaves. So now we're starting to get look not very good for Germany. So remember, Germany, Austria, they want to. They're losing all their people. So they're losing all their people. They lost all their friends, and now they got to think about leaving the war. Germany wants to leave the war because, again, their supply lines are crippled. They can't get supplies to their armies. There's a shortage of troops. We're starting to lose all these troops because of all these battles. Because they lose all these battles, all of a sudden people don't want to fight for Germany, and people are leaving. They're deserting. Remember we talked about the influenza, the flu? So 1 in 6 soldiers were dying by the flu. And also, since they couldn't get supplies and food to them, the flu is just ravaging the whole army. And the Kaiser Wilhelm II, had fled Germany. So now we got all these things that are not going so well for Germany. In Austria, the labor force is crippled, so everybody left Austria to fight. So now there's nobody working in Austria. So the economy is terrible in Austria. They also have low food supplies. They also have desertions and riots. And they also have lost so many people in battle. So right now, Germany and Austria, they're like, forget it. It's over. We're not going to win. They sign and they agree to an armistice. An armistice is basically an agreement, like a peace agreement. So if you forget, and this is an easy way to remember this, the armistice happened for World War I on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. So at 11 a.m. on November 11 of 1918, that's when the armistice was signed. So this is the last slide. Just want to show you a quick video. It's only a minute video about how the armistice was responded to. This particular video was like a news video in San Francisco. It's only a minute long.
The war is over. Into Market Street for the men and women of the city to celebrate. Up and down the street they parade, delirious with joy. For some of them have come to know the meaning of war. Grotesque and ugly in their influenza masks, the people of San Francisco celebrate. You've seen the signs they carry. Kaiser Wilhelm is Sweet William now. Who's afraid of the Huns? Some of them signs of hate, most of them just outpourings of a great joy. For this day, November 11th, 1918, marks the end of an era of hate and bloodshed and violence. It's the beginning of peace and goodwill on earth. And those who have died have not died in vain. They've died to make the world safe for democracy. They've swept to victory in the war to end war. And so San Francisco celebrates in 1918 because the war is over and there'll never be another.
So that's the video, and it's just funny that they say like, oh, there'll never be another war. Haha, it's not the last war. But hopefully you understand more about World War I from these 4 videos. Again, this video we just talked about the final years. Remember, 60% of the test is just on everything we talked about World War I. So there's stuff that happened before World War I. We're going to talk about all the peace agreements after World War I, but the majority of the test is just this stuff. So if you master World War I, all the battles, all the people, who was involved, etc., like you will do very well on the academic decathlon. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed my stories about World War I, and I'll see y'all later.